gentlemen, welcome. We're about to start. So welcome to this conference here at the Grand Palais. And I will begin by introducing our two guests. To my left, immediate left, is Dan Esty, who is a professor of environmental law and policy at Yale, author of at least 10 books and dozens of articles on environmental protection, energy, sustainability, and their connection to policy, corporate strategy, competitiveness, trade, and economic success. And 18 months ago, Dan, you initiated the Yale Climate Change dialogue to infuse some fresh thinking in support of this 2015 COP21 conference here in Paris. So that was gearing up to this. It was an initiative based on your conviction that a broader engagement is needed, including mayors, governors, but also CEOs and business leaders, which brings me to our second guest, Rudy Provoost. Welcome. You're the CEO of Rexel, one of the world's leaders in the professional distribution of products and services for the energy world. And you're also the author of a book called Energy 3.0. It's a book that depicts the transformation of the energy world. It's a strong commitment that you have to sustainability, and that's part of the reason why your company, Rexel, joined the Yale Climate Change dialogue early in 2015. And today, with both of you, we're going to discuss your convictions to help fight against climate change and the opportunity to promote an energy efficiency in existing buildings. So we'll be talking a lot about building sector, renovation, energy efficiency. Let's talk about the broader engagement that's needed first. And my first question is to you, Dan. What was your driver to initiate the Yale Climate Change dialogue in support of today's climate change talks? And what are some of the key insights of the work that this thinking group has produced?
The focus on trying to make sure that this meeting in Paris delivered real action goes back, in fact, 23 years to my work on the Framework Convention on Climate Change of 1992. And we put together a treaty at that time that I think a lot of smart people worked on, and we thought would produce a response to climate change, a global response that would transform our energy future and give us a basis for bringing down greenhouse gas emissions. More than 2 decades later, I looked out at what was happening and was quite disappointed. And concluded that some of the problem was in the framework of the global agreement. So I gathered a series of thought leaders from around the world. More than 40 people contributed to this dialogue from 30 different countries. And the idea was, what can we do differently in terms of the agreement that gets concluded this week in Paris? And our view was there were some critical points of opportunity that we wanted to infuse into the conversation. And number one, as you suggest, it really all is part of a broader engagement strategy. But number one was to recognize that we made a big mistake in the original treaty in thinking that the national government's conversation was sufficient to the task. And frankly, what we found out is that it's important to have national governments set the direction, but presidents and prime ministers don't actually have that much of a day-to-day impact on the carbon footprints of their society. So we concluded that we needed a broader set of actors. We needed mayors, governors, and CEOs, business leaders, who are the ones that have their hand on the levers that actually determine a carbon footprint. And I think beyond that, we concluded that there was way too little attention paid in that original time to action. And that's why the spirit of Paris that I think is emerging this week is one of focus on solutions and really judging success not by talk or targets and timetables, but by the delivery of solutions and changed behavior on the ground. And third, I think we recognized that there was far too little conversation in that original time around who was going to pay for all the investments required in energy efficiency, in renewable power, in this transition to a clean energy future. So we also thought it was important to broaden engagement on finance and really create a portfolio of new ways to flow resources to the transition required. So it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Rudy, for including me. And I am thrilled to be part of this conversation that I think helps to explain this logic of broader engagement, which I hope is going to be the story of this week in Paris, really launching a new global ramp-up in our commitment to action on climate change that I hope will follow from here as a spirit of Paris that transforms where we go as a global community.
Very clear, and that sets the stage for the reasoning behind your initiative. So let's turn to you, Rudy, as CEO of Rexel. Why, as a global business, did you feel the need to participate in an initiative that was started by the academic world?
Well, I think to be successful in making something happen, it's important that the academic world, the public sector and the private sector join forces. And rather than wait and see, we thought that leading by example was the best way forward. Actually, we started 3-4 years ago when we re-articulated our strategy. And actually, the strategy we launched at that time was called Energy in Motion, because for us, energy is a real cornerstone of the strategy. It's part of our mission statement. It has been the fastest growing category in the past 3 years. Actually, today, in the 13 billion business we represent, about $1 billion is representing our energy solutions business, the work we do in renewable energies and building automation. So for us, it's a very important, engine of growth, of development. And actually, the Rexel brand promise talks about creating a world of energy. So in a way, energy there is, I would almost say, an analogy with what we try to do with our customers, and that is to help them to use their resources better. Their financial resources, their human resources, their natural resources. And we do that in the residential, in the non-residential and the industrial end markets. So in a way, the theme that of broader involvement is something where we thought we need to be part of, and that's why we're here. That's why we joined forces with Dan and the team. And actually we did that also through the work of our Rexel Foundation for a Better Energy Future.
Now, it's interesting and in some ways paradoxical to hear a businessman talking about solutions for fighting climate change, because some people still believe that businesses are more part of the problem than the solution. So maybe you could develop more about the role that you think businesses can play in the solution.
Well, I think companies have 3 responsibilities. First of all, they have to initiate change. And that means that, for example, 30 or 40 companies signing here the French commitment from the side of the business is an important statement of leading by example. Second role of companies is to implement. It's to make it happen. It's promise to perform and perform to promise. And I think you've seen a lot of examples in recent days where very large companies, leaders in their industries, have embraced the challenge and have articulated specific goals, measurable goals for the future. And I think the third responsibility of companies is to innovate, is to incubate. Because we have a lot of brain power, a lot of horsepower, a lot of R&D, and I think creating innovative but also sustainable solutions should be the mantra. Yeah? And so I think with this triple play, companies can contribute, and actually you cannot wait for the public sector or the academic sector. At the end of the day, creating value propositions for customers is the role of the companies.
Now, Dan, let's get you to respond about your views on how companies play into this. You've written many books on corporate sustainability, so what are some of the insights that you can share about the path taken by companies?
So I think you're absolutely right that the 20th century model of sustainability made business out to be the problem or the enemy. I think the 21st century strategy is very different, and it recognizes, as Rudy just suggested, that companies provide a great source of innovation, and they are good at delivering on the ground in implementation. And I think what we've now recognized is that if the world community is going to respond to this huge challenge, we need to engage the business community in a constructive way. It isn't to say that everyone should trust everything business does, but it would be a terrible mistake to put business in the sort of far side of the story, and rather than bring them in centrally. So I think the idea that business is a part of the answer, not part of the problem. Government still has a role to play in channeling behavior and making sure that business does deliver. But I think there's also a lot that's very different today in the 21st century going forward than what we thought the world might have looked like, or where the pathway to success might have been 25 years ago. A second element, which Rudy mentioned in passing, is the ability to bring information technology to bear. So this was just beginning to be thought about when we did the Framework Convention in the early 1990s. But today there is smart buildings, smart systems, smart appliances, and I think it is that marriage of advanced computing power to the clean energy future that has got huge promise. So those are sort of two of the core elements of where I think the world has turned. Our vision of the sustainable future is different from what we might have thought 25 years ago. And in both cases, there is an opportunity to make energy efficiency a central theme of the work going forward. And frankly, we have to call upon lots of people to help deliver on that, including folks like Rudy.
Now, Rudy, you just mentioned that your company, along with many other French companies, have signed the French Business Climate Pledge. Maybe you could tell us more about some of the concrete engagements that Rexel is taking.
So we're pretty much betting on two horses, so to speak. One is that we want to double our energy solutions business, by 2020, using the 2010-11, starting point. And actually, I think we're pretty much on track to do so. And so when I talk about energy solutions, I'm talking about bringing to the market, energy efficient lighting, the best possible ventilation and heating solutions, industrial equipment that is up to the highest energy efficiency standards, in order to serve particularly the construction market in the residential, non-residential and industrial end markets. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin has to do with our own operations. So eventually what we want to do is reduce the carbon emission with 30% over the same planning horizon. And we do that in two ways. First of all, by reducing energy consumption in the sites. We have like 2,500 service and selling points in the world. And the other very important element is, of course, to take out carbon, so to speak, from the physical distribution, the logistics chain. And obviously, as a distributor, we have we have a lot at stake in that distribution, in that physical distribution and logistics network.
Can I just add one
Sure.
thing? Rudy reminded me of of a third point that I think is critical about the way the world looks today compared to 25 years ago. 25 years ago, I think a lot of people believed that a shift to a sustainable future would be a burden, would be a cost, would be a challenge in terms of the weight it would put on the economy. I think what we now see is there's lots of opportunity to do this transition in a way that takes cost out of not only a business operation, but out of family budgets. And so the real key is to figure out how do we make this happen and how do we finance it so that there can be broad engagement on this shift to lower energy consumption as a part of the way all of us live our lives.
No, let me make another third point, as he is making his third point, because talking about our commitments, one thing that we didn't really feature officially, but is very fundamental to our strategy, is a very targeted M&A strategy. Not so long time ago, 2-3 years ago, we acquired a company in the States called Munro Energy Solutions, which eventually is a business model to serve large ESCOs and utility companies in the States. We acquired some software companies in France, which actually allow us to create digitally powered energy monitoring solutions. So the M&A part of the strategy, which is of course part of a larger, Rexel 2020 strategy, is actually a third cornerstone of what we try to achieve in that space.